Top of the middle of the day to you, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to do a little saw-off, and it's going to be between a pretty cherry MS440. We'll take a look at the underside of that saw, and you'll understand why I make that statement. And we're going to run it against my 462, and then we're going to run it against a pretty much stock. I did tune on the carburetor a little bit, and I took out the decompression valve. Pretty new 660 though. I don't know, 5 hours on it, 6 hours maybe, so not a lot of time. Pretty good shape physically. It's beautiful actually. Internally it's pretty much immaculate still, so that's good. But anyway, so I guess let's get some of the information, the tallies out, if we will, in the beginning here. 30-inch Oregon lightweight bar. That's something I conjured up on my own because the 462 is pretty lightweight, and with the 32 it doesn't feel right. It's really nose heavy with a lightweight 32, even the still version, and has a tendency to bounce off the log and hit the deck quite a bit. So the other part of that equation is it doesn't have the low end that you can get out of a 461, and I'm pretty big on low end grunt when I'm falling timber anyway. And so if you think about that in concept, you want low end. The longer the bar, the more parasitic drag you have from the teeth, essentially running around on the inside of the rails, and you have the bottom of the straps and the teeth making contact with the top of the rails. And so, well, inside of the rails for the drivers technically, right? Not the bottom, hopefully. Anyway, so you got a lot of drag happening in that situation. I was in the back of a chain manufacturing plant one time, and they were kind of talking about a chain testing dyno that they have, which was a pretty cool setup. Anyway, like a 16-inch bar robs about a half of a horsepower if you look at what the dyno information gives you. So anyway, we kind of yammered on about some stuff, and supposedly the new lightweight keying on the block is the 462 in half wrap form. If we want to talk about displacement for a minute, 72.7, 70.7, and I think it's 91.6 on the 660. So 40 millimeter stroke, 54 millimeter bore, and we're talking about piston movement displacement, not total volume, obviously. And that has a 36 millimeter stroke and a 50 millimeter bore, and the 462 has a 52 millimeter bore and a 34 millimeter stroke. So instantaneous RPMs for sure. I kind of like the way that saw runs if I want to compare those two, because you can get some pretty good low end out of that saw. That would be the 440 or 044 platform. They're rated at 5.4 horsepower from the factory, I think it is, and they come in at 6.0. This is just for comparison. The North American version comes in at 7.0. So back on the weight thing, that's kind of what I wanted to address, especially between these two. Not really the 660, since it's a different class of machine. So if you start looking around and checking out literature information, this is a copy of what you can get in an owner's manual, I guess essentially operator's manual, for an MS440. So it's the standard version. This is off of the website, so I didn't do anything but print it out. I'm hoping that you can see it says 13 pounds even for the 440. I'm thinking you can see that. Okay, I thought that was kind of interesting. I thought they weighed a little bit more than that, but they don't. Well, I'm only running a full wrap version. I call them big kid dogs, big kid clutch cover. That adds quite a bit of weight to the process, actually, about a pound almost. Or yeah, about a pound depending which dogs you choose, that whole thing. So if we look at and this is the North American website that I'm getting the first two pages off of, MS462 CM. We're going to look at It's pretty hard to see because it's small. 6.0 horsepower, and it also weighs 13 pounds even. I'm thinking that you can see that. I'm hoping that you can see that. So that was the North American website. So then, because I'm a curious type, I checked out the wrap version, and if we look at that, we see it weighs 13.9 pounds. So virtually it gained 0.9 of a pound when you added the West Coast R model accessories to the base model. I'm thinking that the 044 probably gains a whole pound because a couple of things are going to be a little bit heavier. So if we go to the European website, they still have the MS440 listed in their literature, which I thought that was really cool. And they actually have the 5.4 horsepower registered right there as well. But the weight all of a sudden is 6.3 kilograms. So instead of being an even 6 or 5.9, depends on how you're rounding, I guess, the 462, the North American version, has 6.0 kilograms, right adjacent to the 13.0 pounds. The European version of that, which is this one on the 460, well, here we go, MS440, sorry. Yeah, it gives it 6.3 kilograms as well. That's a heck of a lot more. 0.3 of a kilogram. Kilogram is 2.2 pounds, technically. If we look at the standard version 462, we see it weighs 6 even as well. The little 1 signifies that it's without fuel, without bar, and chain. So there's some discrepancies, I'm thinking, in my thought process. We look at the North American version for the 440, we see that it's 5.9 kilograms and 13 pounds. So there's some rounding going on, but there's definitely some interesting differentials. Somehow they ended up putting him on a fat dog diet, I guess, and when he got over to America, he lost 0.3 of a kilogram, I guess. I'm not exactly sure what happened there. They're going to weigh a lot more than just 0.3 if they're in West Coast trim, which is the full wrap handlebar, big clutch cover, big dogs essentially. The chain catchers are usually different in those as well. They add a little bit of weight. So we kind of yammered on about weights. I actually gassed them both up completely full, spilling out of the gas tank a little bit, full tanks of oil, and I weighed them both on the same set of scales, which they're not a weights and measure accurate. They're just some bathroom scales I have in my shop for my reference. They weighed 16.4, the both of them. So evidently the claim to fame on the Super Awesomeness Lightweight is only good if you want to talk about the factory rated 6.0 horsepower. Anyway, so kind of a long session, diatribe, if you will, about some of the weights and stuff. I thought that was just curious myself personally. I'm starting to find that there are a lot of other people out there in this world that are curious about stuff as well, and here we are. So we're going to take a couple cuts with each saw. We'll have a bar change in the middle. I'm going to be pausing it, however, in between sessions so I can get the bar and chain handled and then get the saw warmed up, and then we'll check from there. The other thing I'm going to talk about real quick that I haven't mentioned in any of these sessions, I don't think, at least I don't remember, there's a disadvantage that's unfair to the standard type saws when we're tuning by carburation them to the same RPMs that we tune a auto-tune Husqvarna saw or a M-Tronic tuned STIHLS chainsaw, because they actually will run at a higher RPM. Technically, they're limited, if you want to talk about spark that we're monitoring, they come in generally around 13.56 is when they cut out. That's what that means is that's where it's actually registering and it's running. It's actually hitting up higher on a few of those strokes because with the interrupted stroke signal happening essentially while the piston's going through the process, you have a registered number of 13.56 thousandths RPM wise. And this saw, if you have it running the same way, this saw being the 440, you have to have that dialed in with the carburation. So they're all at a disadvantage straight away. I don't know exactly what they would run. I've seen some of the auto-tune saws run into mid-14s. When you have them under load, they'll run about around that 13.5 range as well. When you're wide open throttle, no load on the bar and chain, the rev limiter takes over. They make it to about 13.5 or so. So my speculation is they're good for about another 1,000 RPMs higher. So every X number of stroke through the process of it running is a situation where the controller, that's what they call the new coils because they're running the carburetor, monitoring the spark, adjusting. I guess maybe we could call it AI. They're not firing every revolution. There's a period of time in any 1 minute that you want to monitor where the spark is cut out a certain number of times. What that is, I don't know. So if we tune this saw to 13.5 right out of the gate, it's at a disadvantage. Technically speaking, we should probably run those saws at about 14.5. Like I said, I think you'd find that it'd be a little bit more of an equal comparison, but it is what it is. I think that's something that was important to note in this process. So I guess we're going to go ahead and do a little bit of sawing here now after I warm this saw up. Now we have to keep in mind that this saw is completely bone stock and it doesn't have a bunch of time on it, as we can tell from underneath. It's been a firewood saw. I know the owner, or the ex-owner. I picked it up actually. And this saw is actually already spoken for. All I have to do now is tune the thing up. And the reason we're doing this shootout is I want to compare it to the 462 in stock form when the 462 is built. And then we're going to tune this thing up and see what the difference is, because I'm pretty sure it'll be winning at that point. So let us pause and do the wardrobe change. Out the bar and chain, which technically the power head, we swapped that out since bar and chain are the same. I'm going to check out the upper threshold reading for the tachometer. And we just watched the 462, and I can tell from the amount of resistance I have to apply onto the handlebar and the pistol grip that it's stomping on the pretty much bone stock. No, it's completely bone stock 440. And now we'll do another wardrobe change. So I remembered that we needed to take a look at the stop, so I'm going to do that real quick, I guess. Special tool zeroed. So they're sitting about 55. Feels like could actually take them down a little bit on the saws that are zipped. But we're not going to do that because we run stock saws sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Whoops. Okay, so sometimes it's kind of hard to tell through the computer monitor that one saw feels different than the other. That I'm well aware of. The 660 definitely has the most low-end power of the process here. I'm not thinking that it ran any faster necessarily than the 462. However, it's kind of a little bit of a difference between cutting cookies and real-world working where you're stumping. And so it's kind of my background a little bit, and I'm always looking, well, I can make them wind up too. But for what the guy wants, generally that's using these as a work machine for whatever production or otherwise. Some guys are aficionados, they like just cutting firewood, whatever. If you want low end, there's a certain way you kind of have to go about it. And so in stock form, 40 millimeter stroke, bigger bore, way more displacement, but that's kind of how that saw runs. High winder for sure, instantaneous RPMs, kind of suffers on the low end. Kind of an intermediate, the way things are set up. This saw is going to come alive here shortly, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be giving that one a run for its money, and I'm pretty sure we're actually going to be burying it in the dirt. So, let us be thankful for the things that we have in this life. Let us be thankful that we have friends and family in this process to help us get through the day sometimes. I'm thankful that you took the time to check this out. We talked a lot about these two in comparison. There's a lot of talk about how that's a replacement for the 461. It's really not. It's a replacement for this saw, actually, in my professional opinion, based on what I know, running mini saws over multiple years, cutting millions and millions of board feet. So, yeah. Again, thanks for watching this session. Have a blessed day wherever you might be on God's green earth.